it's one of those things where I wrote it down in an email and I sent it into the event and didn't really think about how difficult it might be to say on the day. It's also a fairly large topic as well. So I've decided to refocus slightly, and rather than try and give you chapter and verse on the entire project, really my message is why you should embrace Agile delivery, methodology, and user-centric design to improve your identity services. And it's interesting that user-centric design's come up, I think, a few times. People have talked about improved user experience this morning. Yannick certainly did, and Simon has to an extent. So the service that we've got, it's called Care Identity Service. It's actually part of the national spine, the NHS spine. It's been around for 13 years or so, thereabouts, so maybe 12, 13 years. Started in 2003, initially, under the National Programme for IT, and it's been growing ever since, and more applications have been added to it. So what you can see here are some of the services it provides. It's really about identity proofing and verification more than your traditional provisioning system type scenario. So I think Colin might have mentioned eGIF earlier on. So I think we're one of the last organisations that still are probably more aligned with eGIF than other standards, and we use that in our identity proofing and verification process. So we have a large number of administrators that we call registration authority agents and registration authority managers. They're responsible for collecting ID, ensuring that people really are who they say they are, and issuing credentials. And at this time, it's mostly smart card based. So there's about 10 to 12,000 of those people in the NHS who do these things part-time. It's a delegated administration model. In addition to that, we've got somewhere between 40 and 60,000 business sponsors. Those are the people, the line managers who approve access rights for people in a local organisational context. Now, I say that because, again, I think there was a concept of a cross-organisational identity that might have been Yannick this morning. Our care workers can move and do move across all of the various organisational contexts in the NHS, and we give them a single national identity which can be used in any of those contexts. Currently, we've got over 20,000 application instances integrated with the service. Now, this is an API-based model. It's not a provisioning system. We don't push information out to all those systems. So it's very cloud-like, but it's got origins in the distant past from a cloud point of view, shall we say. But we've now rebuilt it and modernised it, which is great. Equally, we've got around 1 million end users, probably 800,000 active end users. We've verified over 1.5 million users' identity in the eGIF Level 3 process. And every weekday, about 250,000 people will log on to our service to get access to a variety of applications. So it's critical. Yeah, if this system goes down, people can't prescribe, they can't dispense, you can't see allergy information or summary care record information, and hence it's critical national infrastructure. It's absolutely got to be right. And equally, behind all of those 20,000 instances of systems, for the grand majority of people in here, there will be probably some of your data that is protected by this system. It affects me, it affects you guys, it affects a lot of people in England, and therefore it absolutely has to be right. So those of you that have read the bump will know that I presented back in 2013. And really, I was outlining the journey we had ahead of us. We had a national service, critical national infrastructure. It's currently outsourced. The contract was about to expire. We needed to do something. And at the time, we probably didn't know exactly what that thing was going to be. As it turns out, we have brought it in-house. That was the final decision after a lot of market research. But we were left with this challenge of an organisation that perhaps isn't ready or used to operating critical national infrastructure in that way. We manage suppliers that do that stuff, but actually bringing it in-house and operating that ourselves is a significant challenge. We didn't have a lot of time. So as per usual in sort of public sector and government, there was a bit of prevaricating. We left ourselves with not enough time to follow our old delivery mechanism, should we say, to put this new service in. So we were kind of forced down an Agile route. And to be clear, the deadline that we had really from starting this to finishing it was only about 18 months. And it took us that long in the old service to get a change in. So we wanted to put a new page or a new workflow into the system, it would take us a year and a half in the old. We had to rebuild the entire thing from scratch. And this term was banded around, it's got to be functionally equivalent. Okay, so we couldn't really lift and shift this thing. It was based on ancient technology, Sun Identity Manager, and a plethora of other bits and pieces. Calendra, does anyone remember Calendra? That was in there. We had some other smart card provisioning services, some Sun Access Manager, some Gemelto clients, and all the rest of that kind of stuff. We were told it's got to be functionally equivalent. The reason for that is nobody really knows everything it does end to end. So this is the worst kind of requirement. I've been in identity projects where they've just said the requirements are to re-platform this on something new, and then you spend months and years trying to understand what this thing does, and it's a bit of a nightmare. So back in 2013, when I was here, I really felt I was laying down the gauntlet, and what I really meant to do was ask for help, but I was sending this challenge out to the supplier community saying, okay, we've got this big challenge. Who's going to help us? Who's able to operate in this space with infrastructure of this criticality, that understand the NHS, that understand our environment, that really know what they talk about, that can help us deliver. Perhaps I was a little adversarial in my delivery of that because not many people stepped up, although I will say that some of our delivery partners are in the room today, so it wasn't all bad. And I set out some themes for the new service. So whilst we had the opportunity to rebuild, I wanted to address some of the significant shortcomings that I saw. So this is related to the fact people not really fully understanding what the thing did. The governance model was very complex, and I think that's because it had been around for 10 years, and as the thing had been developed and new features had been added, people might have forgot the origin of some of those requirements. And actually the original policy intent of the service had probably been buried under great ideas from people that were fleetingly IG architects in the organisation had disappeared off, or even to the point where I think there was, people had made stuff up pretty much. There was no clarity. People didn't know what the actual requirements were. So simplifying that so people were very clear on what they were doing in the system, why they were doing it was the top priority. Process optimization. So the theme of the last presentation was we've got a lot of end users. We've got 1 million people who are using smart cards. If it takes half an hour for them to renew a certificate, that's a lot of time spent doing that thing. We've also got 10,000 administrators. If it takes them half an hour to register a user, that's a lot more time spent, and so on and so forth. So getting the critical and most used workflows down to a reasonable amount of time, that was also a priority. And user-centric design. So I think probably when I presented this last time, I didn't really know the difference between user-centric design and a nice UI. And I was probably saying, having a nice interface is not the preserve of the consumer identity space. Yeah? Why would we not provide a good user experience and a nice front end and a slick user experience for an employee-based service? And I say employee very loosely. These are people who are involved in the provision of care services. What I found is if you start with 3, you get 2 and 1 for free, basically. So really, the point is if you have a user-centric design process, then you will get your processes optimized. They will be optimal as a result of that. And because people have to understand what they're doing, you'll get a simplified governance model as a result. So I've assembled, for your pleasure, a few of the ways that I feel Agile practices and user-centered design helped HSCIC and how I think they can be applied to common problems that you see in identity delivery projects. So basically, this is why I think you should be looking at Agile and user-centered design. Number 1, getting started. I talk to people in other organizations that are still in the same place now as they were in 2013. They literally haven't moved on. They're sitting there. They don't know how to get started. Analysis, paralysis, all of that kind of stuff. Too many cooks, who knows? But they don't seem to be able to get started. Now, how we did this and how Agile helped us do that is we picked a very common standard, Scrum. We're going to go with Scrum. It gives you very short deadlines, weekly iterations, and we just started doing that even without a development team. So we've got the program team, the program managers, the project managers, the architects, the IG people, and we started working in an iterative way around every single aspect. The design, requirements capture, user engagement, all of the things that we needed to do to get the thing moving, we just started. And I think if we hadn't done that, we would never have met our timescales. Second, feature creep, or scope creep, whatever. You know, there's a big problem, I think, in any major program, but definitely in identity management, where when people get an idea that you're actually delivering something, suddenly somebody will appear with a new use case. Oh, can you, whilst you're delivering that service, could you possibly put this one in? Or I've got a new application that I want to bring into scope, or I've got a new feature, or a new attribute, or something like that. So we put in, again, this is kind of pre-development phase. It's meant to be executed very quickly, a value assessment process that takes things from concept through to build and being validated by end users. And it allows us to map all of the things that are possibly inbound into a large project. So over on the left-hand side, those are things that come in as concept. I'll show you a slide of how we capture that information quickly. But the point of this was it was meant to be an objective process. So people can't just turn up and say, I want you to do this thing because I want it. We had to assess them against any other possible requirement that was coming in. And we did that in a very objective way. This is an example of the way that we actually capture requirements from users now. And it looks complicated, but actually you can complete one of these in 15 minutes. And it's a very useful device for batting away people that have got seeming requirements, but actually it's a self-serving intent or that sort of thing. So we capture who are the users that are affected, who are the users that are going to benefit from this, what's the impact on the organization. This is done in collaboration. So this is really the start of the user-centered design process. If you're a user of the system, you want something new, we'll help you fill this out. It's a quick process. Decision-making. So again, identity management projects I've seen, who is the decision maker? I think it differs in every project. I've noticed from the agenda, there are some where you've got identity management projects that are driven out the security team. There's some projects where it's the business that are driving identity. I think we had a claim that HR should own identity in some organizations. Who actually makes the decisions about what it is that you're going to deliver? And Agile gives you a very helpful tool here. One user or one person is empowered for a certain domain, and that person is the product owner. And once you buy into that Agile process, and they're making the decision, it's their job to solicit feedback and requirements from all of the stakeholders and to share those with the delivery team and make sure that there is a shared understanding between the consumers and the delivery team. And that looks a bit like this. And I think the great thing about this is once you're stood in front of all of those people and they're all expecting you to make a decision, you have to get used to making decisions very quickly. And I do believe it's better to make a decision and move on quickly, even if it's not the right decision initially. The whole point is you can be agile about this. Prioritization. So there's a concept in Agile, the minimum viable product. I'm sure a lot of you are fully aware of this. But in an Agile process, you assess that every single day. You assess all the work that the team's on every single day, and everybody in the team can see exactly all the tasks that are going on. I've definitely been on projects where you get to the end and you think, well, if only we hadn't wasted all that time doing this thing that actually wasn't really worth anything at all. In Agile, it's all on the board, and everyday people can challenge that. What you're looking at here is actually, this process changed fairly frequently, so we did what we needed to do at the right time. This is a pre-go-live Kanban board for one of the squads that was to do with platform and infrastructure. It's not very clear, but these cards on the left-hand side, the pink cards, you've got three streams. In the top stream, those are absolutely, they must go in for go-live. The middle stream is things we probably should really do for go-live. And the bottom stream are things that we want to do, but probably won't get done. And every time somebody's touching one of those cards, saying, I'm working on this card, they can be challenged. I don't think we need that. And the team becomes self-managing, and it makes sure that only the most important things are delivered. Communication, user engagement. Again, this is a common theme. I think the difference here is you don't just do this once up front. Yeah, this is an ongoing process. This photo is actually a post-go-live user workshop that we were running. It's quite a close-up shot. There was about 40 people in this workshop. We ran them up and down the country with our end users. after we went live, we wanted to know what it was they wanted next, and we keep doing that. This feedback loop has to be continuous, because if your users don't feel engaged with the application you're providing or the process, then it doesn't matter how great it is. They're not going to want to use it. Another thing that we did, and Agile helped us in the communication area, is the way that user stories and development of the service is managed. So rather than in an old world where you'd have a 150-page OG document with all of the requirements in it and you try and share those with the end users, in an Agile process, you're delivering the application at the same time as you're engaging with the users. You can give them bite-sized chunks of information for them to assess and review immediately before delivery, and they are easily digestible because they're human-readable form. So how do we do? So we might have missed our hard deadline, just. I think it was probably more a hard deadline for my career in HSCIC, to be honest, than anything else. But we were under 3 months late, which for government public sector is not bad. And given the initial challenge, which might have been slightly unreasonable, I think we did very, very well. We believe it's about half the cost of the previous service. For a lot of reasons, it's difficult to give you an exact estimate on that because it came out of a prime contract and all the rest of it, but it's astonishingly cheaper. The organizational readiness, well, the user-centered design process kind of helped us with that, really. Having users engaged from the start and making sure that there were lots of stakeholders engaged the entire way through the process meant that by the time we went live and we were delivering software regularly, we were so good at it, it wasn't a problem. And functional equivalence. We only delivered 60% of the original scope of the project, my estimate, and that's a good thing, because the other 40% would have cost us money, and it probably wouldn't have been used. Because users saw every single feature that went into that service before it was delivered, we knew that we were only delivering the high-value things, and that's what the user-centered design process gave us. The Agile process, however, ensured that they were delivered well. And so we've come full circle. So we're still looking for suppliers who want to collaborate with us in this space. I think now things are different. You know, we have insourced this. We can stand in our own space, and in the knowledge that we run and operate a very successful, award-winning service, but we can't solve all of these problems ourselves, and we are still looking out there for people to step forward and help us with that. Has the identity management industry moved on sufficiently that it's now ready to take up that challenge with us? I'll let you know in 2017. Thank you very much.